Hello and welcome to my channel. For this episode, we are going to be talking about the locking mechanisms on a folding knife. Now, it would come as a no surprise for people or guys that are more familiar with knives, but for those who have just handled a knife for the first time, the first problem they usually have is once they've already opened it, they would not know how to close it. Now, this video is supposed to answer those questions, and I'm going to be tackling about the most common types of locking mechanisms in a folding knife. Well, folding knives, a folding knife would not be safe without that locking mechanism. So the locking mechanism is very, very important, as that would make the knife rigid, solid, and most importantly, the blade would not gonna be folding back to you. So without further ado, let me introduce you to the basic or to the most common types of knives that I know, and I'm gonna be giving samples on how to open and close them most importantly. Number one, I would say the most common type of a locking mechanism in a folding knife would be the liner lock. Now, a liner lock is so because the construction of the knife has a liner on it. To demonstrate, this outer part here, which is G10, that is the scale of the knife. The inner part, which is the metal part you see there, the thin one, this guy, those are called the liners. Now, a liner lock is because that guy is locking the blade as the knife is being opened. See? So that liner functions as the lock, hence the name, a very basic name, the liner lock. Now, liner locks are quite robust, and depending on the construction of how the knife was made, it gives a good locking mechanism. But for sure, knives that are built in a lower quality would present problems because, see, this knife doesn't have any wiggle in it, and the liner lock, if you can check that out, is so thick that it's robust. Now, the closing action of the knife would be to simply displace that liner and put it back parallel. See that? Just displace it a little bit. Displace it, either left or right. Left-handed, just put it out of the way. Right-handed, put it out of the way. And the knife can already be closed. That's the liner lock. Another example of the liner lock will be this knife. And if you can compare the lock on this one, if you can compare the liner on this one, it's much harder to see because it's black as compared to the liner on this guy. You would clearly see that the liner on this one is thicker and the liner on this one is thinner. Nevertheless, this is still a good knife, and the qualities, no movement on the blade at all. And as usual, you displace or that liner should be out of the way so that when the knife comes folding in, you have a folded knife. Second type, or a variation of the liner lock. This is not yet the type 2. This is not yet a second type. It is a variation of the liner lock because it still has a liner, although this one is an inset liner, which is inside, and you can clearly see it on this end. See those two? That is still a liner, but you can only see it in this side because inside it's flushed into the scale. And this variation is called a compression lock. It's still a liner lock, but it's mainly called a compression lock because it's opposite. It's not on the inside as compared to this one. It's in the back side, but it has the same basic function. When you open the knife, the liner goes out of the parallel and locks into the knife, into the blade. And Spyderco has got introduced this system, locking system, for the paramilitary too. And such a nice locking system it is. So as it opens, there goes the lock, the liner, and if you close it, you just same routine, just displace it out of the way and the knife closes. That's the liner lock. Now the next type of lock nearest to the liner lock would be a frame lock. Now a frame lock knife, as the name would imply, would be using the frame of the knife itself. This particular sample has titanium frame, both sides, and there's a cutout for that. And the frame itself would be the locking mechanism, hence aptly called a frame lock. As you open the knife, you would see the frame lock into it. And that for me would be a perfect lock, not too late. And this would be called a very early lock. And I like early locks because it has lesser chances of developing blade wobble or blade play. A variation of the frame lock, because this frame lock, as you can see, the basic of a frame lock is it would have a hardened steel insert. Titanium is a dense metal, but not as dense as compared to a heat-treated blade. So if it's a heat-treated blade rubbing against a titanium frame, that would not be good because over time, two dissimilar metals, something would give. So the solution for that would be to have a steel insert, which would be placed by that screw, torque screw, and the steel insert is also a hardened metal that will be meeting up with the hardened blade. So this is a much nicer setup for a frame lock. It would have a better reliability on on its locking. Now, a variation of the frame lock is the one having, not having a steel insert, which is this guy. This is a frame lock with no steel insert, and that would just be a titanium frame locking into a hardened steel blade. So far this knife is not giving me any problems, but I would much prefer a frame lock with a steel insert on it. Now the same as with the liner lock, just get that out of the way, either left hand or right hand, and you can proceed to close the knife. Third type would be the lockback. Now the lockback mechanism, I'd call it lockback because I think that would be proper as compared to some that would be calling it backlock. But lockback it is. Now the lockback mechanism is I would say it would be a mechanism that is easiest to lock or to unlock. As you open the knife, this torsion bar here sets it up. It's a much harder, because all the mechanism is inside. So if there's a cutout and we can open things up, then it will be clear on the back lock or the lockback. Sorry. But that is a lockback since the lock is in the spine or in the back of the knife. I say this is easier because you just depress this and then the blade falls, and then you can proceed to close the knife. Opening the knife would be through a thumb stud or this stud here, or a thumb hole, and closing it, left hand or right hand, is easier because you just proceed to press that and the knife falls. It is a bit hairy if you don't have gloves. I'm confident because I have this glove here. But without that glove, you need to make sure that the knife is in a 90-degree angle so that when the blade falls, it would just be in a 90-degree position. Because if you have this in this angle and you depress it, it will be greater. And if you can see that without that glove, that would already be hitting my finger. So make sure the knife is in a parallel, and you just press on it so that it just falls ever so slightly, and you can go on closing it. That would be the third type, the lockback. Moving on into the fourth type. The fourth type would be the axis lock. If you see something with that indent, that will be the axis lock. Nice thing about the axis lock is it's ambidextrous, much like the back lock, because it's in the center. This one, it's in left and right. And you just need to move this slider. It's spring detency. It's that slider there that moves out of the way as your knife opens. See that? Come on. There you go. As you open the knife, that slider engages and it's already locked. To unlock it, you simply need to pull it out of the way. See that? I'm engaging it from the other side so that you can see it from here. Put it out of the way, and this is already ready to fall. I really like this kind of lock because, as you can see, if you've already mastered it, it's just a matter of holding that and then depressing it from both ends, doing that, and then it already folds out of the way. You need to practice it because sometimes if you're not careful, as the blade locks here, your finger is still there and it will be chopping it off. So be careful with that. An example would be this one, a much bigger knife than that, but since it's a much bigger knife, you have lots of area to hold it in this end, and you don't get to hold it in that way, so it's much better for doing that action. Really nice to play with. Moving on to the fifth most common type of locking mechanism. Well, it's not exactly a locking mechanism, but since we're talking about folding knives and it somehow semi-locks it, this would be the friction or the slip joints. Slip joints, they do not have a lock. It's merely a detent, and you merely push it out of the way to take it out of that detent lock. So technically it's not a lock, it's just a semi-lock. But with the slip joints, what they usually do, they increase this choil over here. It acts as a finger guard, so when you're holding it like this, it's way much harder for the knife to fold into you because that is acting as a stop. See? But still, you need to be careful if you're not used to handling slip joints. You know, the motion of cutting should be all just like this, because once there's a small amount of pressure applied to this, that joint collapses, that joint slips, and the knife would come folding down into your fingers. There's no lock. So slip joints, I would technically say it's a semi-lock, but it's still one of the locks, common locks that you can find in the modern folding knives. Now, just a few things to mention. There's also a ring lock, and that I don't have a knife for that one. It's an Opinel thing. Opinel is a French-made knife. Hopefully I have some sample in the future so that I can update this knife locking episode. And it's a ring lock wherein it functions as a, it's a circular ring that locks it so that when you unlock it, when you unlock it there's a ring that comes around so that it wraps around here, and it functions as a lock. It's a ring lock. Another worthy of mention would be a balisong lock. Although it's still a folding knife technically, and the lock of the balisong is there's a spring to it, so you just need to apply pressure going inside, and as you squeeze both of them, and it releases. You open it, close it on the other side, and then put pressure again to release it, and close it again. Other types would be another knife lock which I don't have. It would be the Cold Steel brand, and it would have the triad lock, which based on what I saw on the reviews, they say it's the most robust of all the lock types. And last would be the SOG brand. They also have a arc lock, but the most common types would be these guys. And hopefully when I do an update on this video, we can include the Cold Steel brand and the triad lock, just so And I think that will be it. That was fast. I was trying to talk fast, but it still hit the 20-minute mark. Thank you for watching the video, and thank you for staying with me this long. I hope I've shed some light on the different kinds of locking mechanisms on the modern folding knives. These are just, like I said, these are just the most basic, the most common of them. And hopefully I can update this and include the triad, the ring locks, and the SOG arc locks in a future video when this video needs updating. So once again, thanks for watching the video. Please keep the support coming. I really appreciate it, and hope to see you guys in the next video.